Did you know that some R&B stars died in a shocking and tragic way? From Lisa Lopes, who died in a car crash while volunteering in Honduras, to Johnny Ace, who accidentally shot himself backstage on Christmas Day. Here are 15 of the most shocking R&B star deaths. Aaliyah. Aaliyah was one of the brightest stars of her time. She brought a fresh style to R&B, pop, and hip-hop, changing the sound of music in the late 90s and early 2000s. But just as her career was reaching new heights, her life came to a tragic end. On August 25, 2001, Aaliyah and her team had just finished filming the music video for Rock the Boat in the Bahamas. They were supposed to return to the U.S. the next day, but with filming wrapping up earlier than planned, the group decided to head home right away. Instead of waiting, they boarded a smaller Cessna 402 plane at Marsh Harbor Airport. The aircraft was packed with people and equipment, more than it could safely carry. Just after takeoff, tragedy struck. The plane crashed only about 200 feet from the runway and burst into flames. Everyone on board, Aaliyah, the pilot, and 7 others, including her security guard, stylists, and record label staff, died instantly. According to witnesses at the airport, there were arguments before takeoff. The pilot, Luis Morales, reportedly warned the group that the plane was overloaded and unsafe to fly, but the team insisted that they needed to be in Miami that night. Despite his concerns, the flight went ahead. The news of her death at just 22 years old shook the world. A later report by the coroner's office in the Bahamas revealed that Aaliyah suffered severe burns, head trauma, and shock, injuries so grave that survival would have been nearly impossible. Fans and the entertainment industry mourned deeply. In October 2001, BET premiered Rock the Boat, giving people one last glimpse of her artistry. The following year, she was honored with 2 posthumous American Music Awards. Her final film, Queen of the Damned, came out in February 2002, with some of her lines completed by her brother Rashad during post-production. On the first anniversary of her passing, fans held a candlelight vigil in New York's Times Square, while radio stations across the country played her music in remembrance. Lisa Nicole Lopes. Lisa Nicole Lopes, popularly known as Left Eye, was a member of the legendary R&B girl group TLC at the time of her death, alongside Tion, T-Boz Watkins, and Rosanda Chili Thomas. While each member brought something unique to the group, Lisa was the creative force. She rapped, sang, and also played a major role behind the scenes, helping shape the group's sound, style, and image. She co-wrote more songs than the others, came up with ideas for album titles and artwork, designed some of their outfits, and even created the stage design for their fan mail tour. With TLC, Lisa won 4 Grammy Awards, making her one of the most influential women in R&B. But in 2002, her life was cut short in a tragedy that still shocks fans to this day. Just 2 weeks before her own death, Lisa was involved in another heartbreaking accident in Honduras. While riding as a passenger in a van, her assistant struck a 10-year-old boy named Byron Isao Fuentes Lopez, who had stepped into the road. Lisa rushed to help, cradling the injured child in her arms as they tried desperately to save him. Despite their efforts, the boy died the next day. Deeply shaken, Lisa paid for his medical bills and funeral costs, and was even seen in her documentary where she was seen picking out a casket for him. She believed she was being followed by a spirit, and she noticed something haunting. The boy's last name was almost the same as hers. She even wondered if the spirit had meant to take her instead. On April 25, 2002, Lisa's fears finally came true. Lisa was driving a rented Mitsubishi Montero SUV in La Ceiba, Honduras. As she swerved to avoid a truck and then an oncoming car, the vehicle lost control, flipped several times, and crashed into trees before coming to rest in a ditch. The force threw Lisa and 3 others out of the windows. She suffered fatal head injuries and died instantly. At just 30 years old, Lisa was the only person killed in the crash. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and chillingly, the entire accident was caught on camera since a documentary crew had been filming her in Honduras. Her funeral took place on May 2, 2002, at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. Thousands of fans gathered to say goodbye to the woman whose energy, creativity, and fearless spirit made TLC unforgettable. Johnny Ace. Johnny Ace was one of the rising stars of rhythm and blues in the 1950s. With his smooth voice and heartfelt ballads, he quickly became a favorite on R&B radio stations and jukeboxes across America. His hit songs, including My Song, Cross My Heart, and Pledging My Love, made him one of the most promising young singers of his time. But just as his career was taking off, he died in a way no one expected. On Christmas Day in 1954, Johnny Ace was performing at the City Auditorium in Houston, Texas. He had been on tour for a year and was enjoying the height of his fame. But during a break between sets, the atmosphere backstage turned deadly. Johnny had a habit of carrying around a small .32 caliber revolver. According to his friends, he often played with it, sometimes even shooting at road signs while traveling with his band. That night, he had been drinking and began waving the pistol around a table backstage. Members of the band warned him to be careful, but he brushed them off, smiling and saying the gun wasn't loaded. According to witnesses, he then lifted it to his head and then shot to prove his point. Big Mama Thornton, who had been in the dressing room, ran out screaming, "Johnny Ace just killed himself." There were rumors at the time that he had been playing Russian roulette, but those close to him denied it. They said it was simply a terrible accident. Big Mama Thornton later explained that Johnny had even pointed the gun at his girlfriend and another woman earlier, but didn't fire. When he turned it on himself, confident he knew which chamber was empty, the gun went off. He was only 25 years old. Johnny's death shocked the music world. His funeral took place on January 2, 1955, at the Claiborne Temple AME Church in Memphis. Around 5,000 mourners showed up to pay their respects to him. In the weeks that followed, his final single, Pledging My Love, became a posthumous hit. It reached #1 on the R&B charts, staying there for 10 weeks. Billboard even compared the demand for his music to the wave of grief that followed Hank Williams' passing just 2 years earlier. Johnny Ace's death marked one of the first times an artist became a chart-topping success only after death. Teena Marie. Teena Marie was often called the Ivory Queen of Soul because of the lasting mark on R&B and soul music. With her powerful soprano voice, full of emotion and richness, many listeners assumed she was black when they first heard her songs. Her debut album, Wild and Peaceful, didn't feature her picture, and radio programmers across the country played her music under that belief. The truth only came out in 1979 when Teena performed her first hit with Rick James on Soul Train, becoming the show's very first white female guest. She went on to appear on Soul Train 8 times, more than any other white artist. Her passion for soul music and her unwavering loyalty to the genre won her respect and fame. But the way her story ended was as unusual as it was tragic. Years before her death, she had an encounter that almost ended her life. In 2004, while staying at a hotel, Teena was asleep when a large picture frame suddenly fell and struck her on the head. The blow caused a concussion, and afterward she began suffering from seizures that would stay with her for the rest of her life. On December 26, 2010, the day after Christmas, Teena Marie's daughter, Aaliyah Rose, went to check on her in their Pasadena home. That morning, nothing had seemed wrong, but by the afternoon, Aaliyah found her mother dead. She was only 54 years old. An autopsy performed a few days later found no trauma or clear cause of death, ruling that she had died of natural causes. However, just a month earlier, Teena had experienced a serious seizure, and doctors believe it may have played a role. At the time of her death, she had been working on an album titled Beautiful. After her passing, her daughter lovingly finished the project, and it was released in 2013 as her final gift to fans. On January 10, 2011, a memorial service was held at Forest Lawn Cemetery to honor her life and music. The event brought together some of the biggest names in entertainment, including Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, Denise Williams, Queen Latifah, Sinbad, Lisa Ray, Takina Arnold, Shanice, and Berry Gordy. Chris Bender. Chris Bender was a rising star in R&B whose career was just beginning to take off when his life was cut short. In 1991, his debut album Draped climbed onto the Billboard R&B chart, reaching number 92. Songs on the album, Like I Knew and That's Not the Way, broke into the top 70 on the Hot R&B Singles chart, giving him his first taste of national success. With a 7-album deal worth $500,000 signed with East West Records, Chris seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. Sadly, he never got the chance to see it unfold. On the early morning of November 3, 1991, Chris was back in his hometown of Brockton, Massachusetts. At around 2:17 a.m., he sat in his blue Mercedes-Benz outside the Crescent Court housing project where his mother lived. His 17-year-old cousin, Jesse Starks, was with him in the passenger seat. The two were talking and smoking marijuana when 3 hooded men walked up to the car and opened fire, unleashing 21 gunshots into the vehicle. In that terrifying moment, Chris instinctively used his own body to shield his cousin from the bullets. Jesse survived without injury, but Chris was hit 5 times. 4 bullets struck his back, and another hit his elbow. He was rushed to the hospital, but the wounds were too severe. At just 19 years old, Chris Bender was pronounced dead. His funeral was held on November 9, 1991, at Melrose Cemetery in Brockton. One of the gunmen, Eroy Kindell, was convicted of second-degree murder, but was eventually paroled in 2008. Another, Stephen Fernandez, was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Johnny Kemp. Johnny Kemp's love for music began early. He began singing in nightclubs in the Bahamas at age 13. In 1979, he moved to Harlem, New York with his band Kinky Fox, hoping to chase his dream. In the early 80s, Johnny worked hard behind the scenes as a session musician and songwriter. He lent his voice to groups like the BB&Q, Band and Change, even co-writing tracks on their albums. His big break came in 1987 with the release of his album Secrets of Flying. The album produced 2 huge hits, Dancin' With Myself and the iconic Just Got Paid. Just Got Paid became a chart-topping anthem, hitting number 1 on Billboard's R&B chart and climbing into the top 10 on the Hot 100 in 1988. The single sold over 1 million copies in the U.S. alone, cementing Johnny Kemp as a star of the late 80s music scene. Decades later, Johnny died tragically. On April 16, 2015, Johnny was in Montego Bay, Jamaica. According to witnesses, he had been seen earlier that day by other cruise ship passengers in the area. He was scheduled to perform on the annual Tom Joyner Foundation Fantastic Voyage Cruise, a popular event celebrating black music and culture. But according to the police, he never boarded the ship. Instead, investigators believe Johnny was walking along some rocks near the water when he slipped, lost his balance, and fell. The impact caused a head injury, and he tragically drowned. He was only 55 years old. His sudden and unusual death was a painful loss to the R&B community. If you are enjoying this video, appreciate it by giving it a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was one of the most celebrated performers in music history. With countless awards, record-breaking albums, and unforgettable music videos, Whitney became a name known around the world. But behind the fame, she struggled with personal demons that would ultimately play a role in her shocking death. In a 2009 interview with Oprah Winfrey, Whitney opened up about her battles with drug use. She admitted that before starring in The Bodyguard, her drug use was light, but it became heavier after the film's success and after the birth of her daughter. By 1996, she confessed, saying, "It was an everyday thing. I wasn't happy at that point. I was losing myself." She acknowledged that even after undergoing rehabilitation, her struggles continued. At one point, her mother had to involve law enforcement to ensure she received treatment. In May 2011, Whitney once again entered rehab for drug and alcohol problems. Tragically, a year later, on February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found unconscious in a bathtub in Suite 434 at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. Reports said she had seemed disheveled and erratic in the days leading up to her death. Paramedics arrived around 3:30 p.m., performed CPR, but she was pronounced dead at 3:55 p.m. Later, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office concluded that her death was an accident caused by drowning, combined with the effects of heart disease and cocaine use. The news shocked fans around the world. Whitney had been expected to attend Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party that day, which quickly became a tribute to her instead. Her memorial service was held on February 18, 2012, at her home church, New Hope Baptist Church, in Newark, New Jersey, and was attended by countless friends, family, and fans mourning the loss of a superstar. After her death, Whitney's music experienced a resurgence. Her record label reported that she sold 8 million records worldwide in the first 10 months of 2012 alone. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye Jr. was one of the most influential voices in music history. He helped define the Motown sound in the 1960s, first as a session musician and later as a solo artist with countless hits. His smooth, emotional singing style left a lasting mark on R&B and inspired subgenres like Quiet Storm and neo-soul. But despite his fame and success, Marvin's life ended in a shocking and tragic way. In the days leading up to his death, Marvin's parents had been arguing repeatedly, mostly over a misplaced insurance policy letter. The day before his death, the arguments even reached Marvin's bedroom. When his father, Marvin Sr., confronted his mother, Alberta, Marvin Jr. tried to protect her, ordering his father to leave without incident. But the tension did not end. On April 1, 1984, around 12:30 p.m., Marvin Sr. began shouting about the insurance document from downstairs. Marvin Jr., dressed in his maroon robe, told his father to come speak in person. When Marvin Sr. refused, Marvin Jr. warned him not to enter his room. Ignoring the warning, his father charged upstairs, and Marvin Jr., angered, shoved him into the hallway. Marvin Jr. reportedly kicked and punched his father in a desperate attempt to defend his mother. Minutes later, at 12:38 p.m., Marvin Sr. returned to his son's bedroom carrying a .38 pistol that Marvin Jr. had bought for him. He pointed it at Marvin Jr. and fired. The first shot hit Marvin's chest, damaging his heart, lungs, liver, stomach, and left kidney. A second shot followed at point-blank range, ending the life of one of music's greatest voices. Alberta and Marvin's sister Jean later said that their father had made it clear that any child who hit him would face deadly consequences. News of Marvin Gaye's death spread immediately. CBS anchor Dan Rather and other media outlets reported on the tragedy. Many friends and fellow musicians were initially in disbelief, with some thinking the news was an April Fool's Day joke. Fans quickly gathered outside the Gaye home on Gramercy Place, leaving memorabilia and holding vigils that lasted until the following day, which was Marvin's birthday. Prince. Prince Rogers Nelson was considered one of the greatest musical talents of his generation. Prince was known for his wide vocal range and mastery of multiple instruments, often playing most or all of the instruments on his recordings. He was a true innovator in music, and his unique sound and persona influenced generations of artists. Sadly, his life ended tragically on 21st of April, 2016. In April 2016, Prince's health began to show signs of trouble. On April 7th, he postponed 2 performances at the Fox Theater from his piano and a microphone tour, reportedly because of influenza. Despite not feeling well, he performed his final show on April 14th. Early the next morning, while flying back to Minneapolis, he became unresponsive on his private jet. The plane made an emergency landing at Quad Cities International Airport in Moline, Illinois, where he was treated with naloxone, a medication that reverses the effects of opioids. Once he regained consciousness, he left the hospital against medical advice. On April 20th, Prince's team reached out to Howard Kornfeld, a specialist in addiction and pain management, seeking help for Prince. Plans were made for an exam on April 21st. That morning, Kornfeld's son flew to Prince's home at Paisley Park with buprenorphine to help manage his opioid addiction. However, at 9:43 a.m., he called 911, first reporting that an unidentified person was unconscious. Moments later, he identified Prince as the person in need. Emergency responders arrived to find Prince unresponsive in an elevator. They performed CPR, but a paramedic said he had likely been dead for at least 6 hours. He was pronounced dead at 10:07 a.m. at the age of 57. Investigators found no signs of foul play. On June 2, 2016, the Midwest Medical Examiner's Office in Anoka County confirmed that Prince had died from an accidental overdose of fentanyl. The fentanyl came from counterfeit pills that looked like generic hydrocodone paracetamol. Prince's death shocked the world. Musicians, cultural figures, and fans mourned the loss of an icon. President Obama paid tribute, and the United States Senate passed a resolution honoring him as a musician, composer, innovator, and cultural icon. Cities across the country held vigils, lit buildings and bridges in purple, and celebrated his life. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was one of the most famous and influential entertainers of the 20th century. With a career that lasted more than 40 years, he broke racial barriers in the music industry and became a global superstar. Michael changed the way people thought about performance, combining music, dance, and fashion in ways no one had ever seen before. He popularized dance moves like the moonwalk, the robot, and the anti-gravity lean, inspiring countless artists to follow in his footsteps. Despite his success, Michael's later years, just before his death, were filled with controversy. His appearance, behavior, and personal life began to change. On June 25, 2009, just weeks before he was scheduled to begin a series of sold-out concerts in London, tragedy struck. Michael was at his rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles, when he suffered a cardiac arrest caused by an overdose of propofol and benzodiazepines. His personal physician, Conrad Murray, had been giving him these medications to help him sleep. At 12:21 p.m., a 911 call was made, and paramedics arrived within 4 minutes. Michael was not breathing, and CPR was performed on the scene and later in transit to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. Despite resuscitation efforts that continued for more than an hour after arrival, he could not be saved and was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. The news of Michael's death spread rapidly, causing websites to crash due to the enormous volume of traffic. People around the world reacted with shock and grief. MTV and BET aired marathons of his music videos, while television stations everywhere broadcast specials honoring his life and career. Michael's memorial service was held on July 7, 2009, at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, following a private family service at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Over 1.6 million fans applied for tickets, though only 8,150 were chosen by lottery. The memorial became one of the most watched events in streaming history, with an estimated 31.1 million viewers in the U.S. and between 2.5 and 3 billion people worldwide watching globally. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was one of the most influential R&B singers of all time. Known as the King of Soul, his smooth voice, groundbreaking music, and impact on popular music made him a legend. But his life was cut tragically short on December 11, 1964, at the Hacienda Motel in South Central Los Angeles. That night, police received reports of a shooting and a possible kidnapping at the motel. When they arrived, they found Cooke dead from a gunshot wound to the chest, which had pierced his heart. The motel manager, Bertha Franklin, said she had shot Cooke in self-defense, but many of his friends didn't believe her. The issue began when a woman named Elisa Boyer, who had been with Cooke earlier, called the police from a nearby phone booth. She explained that she had met Cook earlier in the night and had spent time with him. After leaving a nightclub, she said Cook, who appeared intoxicated, drove her against her will to a motel with the intent of assault. Once at the Hacienda Motel, Boyer said Cook forced her into a room and attempted to assault her. She managed to escape briefly to the bathroom, but the window was locked, so she returned to the room. When Cook left the bathroom, she grabbed her clothes and ran, taking some of Cook's clothing by mistake. Meanwhile, Cook, enraged and naked except for one shoe and a sports jacket, forced his way into Franklin's office, demanding to know Boyer's location. Franklin said she grappled with Cook, and during the struggle, she retrieved a gun and shot him in self-defense because she feared for her life. Cook reportedly said, "Lady, you shot me," in a tone of surprise rather than anger, and then advanced toward her again. Franklin then struck him on the head with a broomstick before he fell to the floor and died. Some of Cook's family and friends have rejected Boyer's version of events, as well as those given by Franklin and Carr. They believe that the killing took place in some manner entirely different from the three official accounts. Despite this, authorities closed the case on Cook's death. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was an American soul singer, keyboardist, songwriter, and arranger. But behind the music, Hathaway struggled with severe mental health issues. By the early 1970s, Hathaway began showing signs of extreme depression and unusual behavior. In 1971, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and was prescribed a variety of medications, at one point as many as 14 different drugs to take twice a day. From 1973 to 1977, his mental health problems affected both his life and his music career, causing several hospitalizations. These struggles also hurt his friendship and musical partnership with Roberta Flack, though they later reconciled and released the hit duet "The Closer I Get to You" in 1978. In January 1979, Hathaway began recording sessions for another duet album with producers and musicians Eric Mercury and James Mtoom. During the session, although he sang well, Hathaway began behaving strangely. Mtoom recalled that Hathaway seemed paranoid and delusional, saying that white people were trying to kill him and had connected his brain to a machine to steal his music and his voice. Concerned for everyone's safety, Mercury ended the session early, and the musicians left. Hours later, Hathaway was found dead outside his 15th floor room at the Essex House Hotel in New York City. He had fallen from his balcony. Investigators reported that the hotel room door was locked from the inside, and the window glass had been carefully removed with no signs of a struggle. Roberta Flack was devastated by the loss of her friend and collaborator. In honor of Hathaway, she included the few duets they had completed on her next album, Roberta Flack, featuring Donny Hathaway. Otis Redding. Otis Redding Jr. was one of the greatest singers in American music and a pioneer of soul and rhythm and blues. Known as the King of Soul, Redding's powerful voice and emotional style were inspired by gospel music, and he influenced many soul artists of the 1960s. Unfortunately, his life ended tragically. In 1967, Redding and his band, the Bar-Kays, were traveling to performances in a small Beechcraft H-18 airplane. On December 9th, they appeared on the television show Upbeat in Cleveland and played 3 concerts in 2 nights at a club called Leo's Casino. After a phone call with his wife and children, Redding's next destination was Madison, Wisconsin, where the band was scheduled to play at the Factory nightclub near the University of Wisconsin the following day. Despite heavy rain and fog and warnings about the weather, the plane took off. About 4 miles from Truax Field in Madison, the pilot, Richard Fraser, radioed for permission to land. Moments later, the plane crashed into Lake Monona. Ben Cawley, a member of the Bar-Kays and the only survivor of the crash, had been sleeping shortly before the accident. He woke just in time to see his bandmate Phelan Jones look out a window and exclaim, "Oh no!" Cawley remembered unbuckling his seatbelt and then finding himself in the freezing water, holding onto a seat cushion to stay afloat. He could not swim and was unable to save the others. The crash claimed the lives of Redding, 4 members of the Bar-Kays, guitarist Jimmy King, tenor saxophonist Phelan Jones, organist Ronnie Caldwell, and drummer Carl Cunningham, their valet Matthew Kelly, and the pilot Richard Fraser. Redding's body was recovered the next day during a search of the lake. Just before his death, Redding had written and recorded the song "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay" with Steve Cropper. Released in January 1968, it became the first posthumous #1 record on both the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B charts. His album, "The Dock of the Bay," also became the first posthumous album to reach #1 on the UK Albums Chart. Redding's sudden and shocking death devastated fans and the Stax record label. Franklin Lyman. Franklin Joseph Lyman was a talented American singer and songwriter. He became famous as the boy-soprano lead singer of the early rock and roll and doo-wop group, The Teenagers, based in New York City. Though their time in the spotlight was short, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers created a string of hits that influenced countless rock and R&B performers who came after them. Lyman's high, youthful voice helped shape the sound of later girl groups, and artists such as Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Smokey Robinson, and the Beach Boys mentioned him as an inspiration. Despite his success, Lyman struggled with drug use. On June 21, 1966, he was arrested for heroin possession. Instead of serving jail time, he was drafted into the United States Army and sent to Fort Gordon, Georgia, for training. However, he was eventually dishonorably discharged. For a time, Lyman stayed sober, but in 1968, he returned to heroin while preparing for a recording session with Roulette Records. On February 27, 1968, tragedy struck. Lyman was found dead on the floor of his grandmother's bathroom with a syringe beside him. He had overdosed on heroin at just 25 years old. Frankie Lyman, a Baptist, was laid to rest at St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx, New York City. Lala Brown. Lala Brown was an American R&B singer with a bright future ahead. She got her big break when singer-songwriter Life Jennings invited her to be on his new track, SEX. Lala was featured on the song and appeared in the music video. The song, which warned young girls about the dangers of unprotected intercourse, appeared on Jennings' second album, The Phoenix. It became a hit, reaching #3 on the Billboard Hot R&B Hip Songs chart and peaking at #37 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 2006. Afterward, Lala toured with Jennings, but the partnership ended after a disagreement. Determined to succeed as a solo artist, she returned to Milwaukee in June 2007 to work on her debut album. Tragically, on October 19, 2007, Lala and her record producer and boyfriend, Jatanu Claiborne, were shot and killed by an unknown gunman in the Loud Enough Productions recording studio. Their bodies were discovered 3 days later by Claiborne's brother. Autopsies were performed on both, but the results were never made public. Their death shocked fans and the music community. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted in February 2010 and on TV1's Celebrity Crime Files on October 22, 2012. As of August 2024, the murders remain unsolved, with police still searching for answers and a motive behind the killings. Which of these stars' death shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our next video for more content.